All right, let's get right into it. Today, we are tackling one of the most ambitious, most disruptive, and, at first, one of the most completely ignored books in the history of philosophy. We're talking about David Hume's A Treatise of Human Nature. Now, get this. It was published back in 1739 by a guy who was still in his 20s. And his goal was, well, it was to do for the human mind what Isaac Newton had just done for the planets, to find the basic, fundamental laws that govern our entire inner world. No small task, right? So, to really get why Hume felt he had to write this massive book, you've got to picture the world he was living in. As he saw it, philosophy was just a total disaster. He describes it as this chaotic battlefield, just filled with noise and clamor, where you had all these thinkers passionately screaming their theories at each other, but nobody, and I mean nobody, had any real proof. This quote just nails that absurdity, doesn't it? Everyone's arguing with absolute certainty about things that are completely uncertain. And this leads Hume to ask this devastatingly simple question, a question that really kicks off his entire project. What if the very foundations of everything we think we know, our ideas about God, about who we are, about morality, even about simple cause and effect, what if they aren't built on solid rock? What if it's all just sand? And what if it could all be washed away with one good, skeptical way? So yeah, this brings us to the big problem Hume was trying to solve. He's looking around at the philosophy of his time and seeing these endless debates. They're all built on incredibly shaky ground. He felt that it had, and this is his own words, drawn disgrace upon philosophy itself. It was time for a hard reset. Think of it like this. For centuries, you had philosophers constructing these magnificent, super complex systems of thought, these giant skyscrapers of the mind. But Hume comes along, takes one look at their foundations, and sees nothing but sand. He points to what he called principles taken upon trust and consequences lamely deduced. In other words, they were starting with pure assumptions, not with hard evidence. So what was his big solution? Well, if the old foundations were sand, he was going to build a new one out of solid rock. And for Hume, that rock was the scientific study of human nature itself. So instead of starting way up in the clouds with abstract ideas about God or the universe, he decided to start with the one thing we can actually observe, ourselves. And the tool he decided to use for this massive job was empiricism. Now, this is the absolute key to understanding everything he's about to do. Hume basically argued that all of our ideas, every single one, has to be traced back to an experience, something we have seen or heard, touched or felt. If you have an idea that can't be traced back to some kind of sensory impression, he argued, it's probably meaningless nonsense. And this really sets up the central battle in philosophy at the time. On one side, you had the rationalists. They believed truth could be found just by using pure logic, and that we're all born with certain ideas already baked into our minds. And then you have Hume, the empiricist, on the other side, saying, no way, the mind is a blank slate at birth. Everything we know, we have to learn it through experience. This quote, it just brilliantly lays out his grand strategy. I mean, he wasn't interested in fighting little philosophical battles on the side. Hume saw the study of human nature as the capital city of all knowledge. His thinking was, look, if we can just understand the mind that's doing the knowing, then we can secure all the other sciences, physics, politics, morality. Everything else will fall into place. Okay. Now let's see how this plays out, because once Hume establishes this empirical method, he starts using it like a wrecking ball on some of philosophy's most treasured ideas. And he starts with something we all take for granted every single second of our lives, cause and effect. Okay, let's run through a classic Humean thought experiment. Picture two billiard balls on a table. You see the first ball roll across the felt, you see it make contact with the second ball, and then you see the second ball roll away. Simple, right? We've all seen this 1,000 times. But wait, here's Hume's killer question. Look really closely at that sequence of events. You saw one thing happen, and then you saw another thing happen. But did you ever actually see the causation? Did you perceive some sort of mysterious force passing from that first ball into the second one? And Hume's shocking answer is no. You never see the cause. All you ever actually see is what he calls a constant conjunction of events. Because you've seen one ball hit another and the second one move away over and over and over again, your mind just creates an expectation. So causation isn't some law of the universe that we observe. It's a habit of our own minds. It's just custom operating upon the imagination. And if that just blew your mind, you might want to hang on, because after taking apart our certainty about the external world, Hume turns that skeptical gaze inward. He asks, what about the self? You know, that consistent me that I feel like I am from one day to the next. Where's that? Go ahead, try to find yourself right now. When you look inside your own mind, what do you actually find? Hume says you don't find some single, stable thing. You find a thought, then a feeling, then a memory, then a sensation. It's always changing. For Hume, the self isn't a thing at all. It's just a bundle of these fleeting perceptions. That continuous you that you feel you are, he says it's a fictitious identity that our mind invents just to tie them all together. So, if we can't be sure about cause and effect, and we can't even be sure we have a stable self, how on earth are we supposed to make moral decisions? Well, Hume's answer here is just as radical as everything else. He argues that we have been giving our reason way too much credit. This is, without a doubt, his most famous quote, and it basically turned centuries of philosophy completely upside down. See, the traditional view was that reason was like this noble charioteer, guiding the wild horses of our passions and emotions. Hume flips that script entirely. He says our passions, our feelings, our desires, they're the ones in the driver's seat. Reason's job? It's just to figure out how to get what the passions already want. It's the navigator, not the driver. And this is the crucial point for morality. For Hume, right and wrong aren't some set of logical proofs you can figure out, and they're not divine commands from on high. It's all a matter of sentiment, of feeling. We call things virtuous because when we think about them, they give us a pleasing feeling of approval, and we call things vicious because they produce a feeling of disgust or disapproval. Morality is grounded in our shared human nature and our ability to feel sympathy for each other. Now, you would think a book this revolutionary would have made a massive splash, right? Well, it didn't. Hume famously joked that it fell dead-born from the press. But its ideas were like a slow-burning fuse that would eventually ignite huge, huge changes in Western thought. Yeah, that initial silence definitely didn't last. Decades later, the great philosopher Immanuel Kant read Hume and famously said it was this work that awoke him from his dogmatic slumber, and it set him on the path to his own philosophical revolution. Hume's strict empiricism also laid the groundwork for the logical positivists in the 20th century, and really for the scientific method itself. And his skeptical questions about cause, identity, and knowledge, they are still fiercely debated today in fields from cognitive science to the philosophy of artificial intelligence. And so Hume leaves us with this profound and, deeply unsettling challenge. He took philosophy's biggest certainties and showed that they might be nothing more than habits of our mind. Which leaves us with one last thought to really chew on. If there is no stable, continuous self, but just a fleeting bundle of thoughts and feelings, then who or what is the you that's watching this right now? This is for entertainment and educational purposes only.